Okay.
We're live. All right. All right. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of The Scientific Outdoorsman. Today, we're going to be talking about an animal that doesn't get enough attention, in our opinion. That is the pronghorn antelope, which is not an antelope. Um, but we wanted to focus on some seasons that are coming up, and a lot of people like to focus on pronghorn before deer and elk seasons kick off. So we thought it'd be fun to dive into some of the research that's been done on these pronghorn. We actually found that there's not a whole lot, at least a lot less than some of the other animals. But this particular paper that we're going to be focused on is looking at management strategies or paradigms for pronghorn and comparing them to different animals to look at how hunting and harvesting of pronghorns affects the size of their horns, and looking at whether there's different management strategies that might be better suited for pronghorns than we've been using in other animals. But before we dive into that, a couple quick announcements. First of all, I swear this is almost the last time you're going to hear me talk about this.
Almost.
The FWC, yeah, almost. I think we might have one more podcast where I'm going to bring this up, but then it's going to be time. So August 13th and 14th, it's going to be FWC's quarterly commission meeting, and this is the meeting where they are going to make a decision on whether or not Florida is going to get a black bear hunt. It's going to be in Havana, Florida, which is like just outside of Tallahassee. So if you're in the area, if you're, southern Georgia, you're in the Panhandle, northern Florida area, or anywhere else for that matter, please try to come out to this. I know it's going to be the start of deer season, at least down south, so it's going to be hard to get hunters there, but we need people to speak in favor of science-based management to get this thing pushed through. So hopefully I'll see you guys there. I'll be there. I'm driving 8 hours to get there from down in South Florida. So hopefully you guys will put in a few hours in the car, and I'll see you there. The big, beautiful bill. God, what can I say about that?
No longer includes public land. That's a good thing to say.
Yeah, that's the most important thing here. They finally passed the bill, but they did strip out all of the language that included public land sales. And I just want to give a shout out to all the influencers out there that helped push the word out to get everybody calling in. I know that backcountry hunters and anglers alone had, I can't remember the exact number, but I want to say it was close to 125,000 actions, committed by their followers and supporters, which is an absolutely insane number of actions. This is people calling in, sending emails through their action alert system. So, NWTF, everybody else had all these action alerts going on as well. So, I think this is just a huge win for this community, but also this country. And I think it just is a great example of what happens when we all stand together for conservation. So I think we should all keep that in mind next time, because there's going to be a next time. Yeah. There will be. And this isn't the first time it's happened either. This has happened, across the decades. There's been people that have wanted to sell public land. But every single time it's the hunting community that steps up and stops that from happening. And we did it again. So it's super duper exciting. I'm stoked about it. And then I just have one tiny little one that I just want to remind everybody. If you're in Florida, and I'm only saying this because I just remembered it myself. I was getting my trail cameras ready to go out in Florida. And I want everybody to remember that we have a new rule in Florida that your gear has to be labeled with your customer ID number. So your cameras, your tree stands, you got to label them with that number, and it needs to be clearly marked so that an FWC officer can walk up and see it. And if they can't, they'll take your gear. So make sure you guys are labeling your gear before you go out and put it out. That includes you, Cody.
Yeah, I didn't know that rule.
Yeah, that's happening this year. Now with your tree stands, it's like not as big of a deal because we both are like mobile hunters. Our tree stands don't stay out, but my cameras definitely do. So just an important one to keep in mind.
Mark's going to go around looking for cameras that don't have any labels on them and take them himself.
No, you can't take them yourself, but you can call it into FWC and have them take them. So, and then I don't know what they're going to do with the ones that they take. Like maybe it'd be kind of cool if they did like an auction at the end of the year, just like auction off all the shit that like people didn't label. But like the real reason for this rule is like not for like new stuff, but it's mostly to like get rid of like old decrepit like tree stands and cameras and stuff that people have left out for years. And you're kind of like, you see stuff out there all the time. You're like, is this still being used? Like, I don't want to take it down if it is, but at the same time, like at this point, it's just trash.
Yeah.
So this will help kind of clean up the woods. So I'm in favor of it, but it is just one extra little step that we have to do. So, yeah. Anyway, so this paper, I don't even really know where to start with this paper.
Well, I think there's a couple of things. So obviously we wanted to pick pronghorn, like you said. It seems like it's an understudied species, but they have so here in Colorado the season starts mid-August, so it's coming up quick. But another thing that was really cool about this paper is that the pronghorn that they did look at were all harvested from public land. So that kind of goes back to, it's connected to this big win for the removal of public land sell-off from that bill. So there's a couple things going on there. But then it incorporates some other species that they talk about, bighorn sheep and elk, because it's looking at this management paradigm, like you were saying before. Do you have hunter opportunity to, be maximized, so as many of these animals as you can harvest as possible and still have it be sustainable, versus kind of like the idea of like trophy animals and having these animals that are going to have massive horns, massive antlers, and I guess combined, think of them, that the paper calls them these weapons, which is you don't really think about that. I don't think of it as that way often, but it's a good point. I guess they are weapons.
It's a weapon.
So just thinking about
you try and walk onto a plane with a big antler, they're going to have a problem with it.
Yeah. Well, they did ask me about the antler that I flew back with Montana with.
Oh, did they really?
Yeah.
I can't believe you found that thing, man. That's such a
I was stoked.
You checked it though, I take it?
No, I had it as a carry-on because I wasn't thinking anything of it, and then they saw it on their scanner thing and they let me bring it on, but maybe because it was a smaller one, they were okay with it. I don't know.
They're like, you can't hurt anybody very much with this.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
So it's a question that applies to all sorts of animals, right? Whether it's your whitetail, mule deer, elk, bighorn sheep, anything that really grows these weapons. What is the ideal management strategy for maximizing both of those, or either of those in a sense? And so they were looking at that specifically for mule deer. I'm sorry, not for pronghorn.
Pronghorn, yeah. I think it's an important discussion to have as well, and I think a lot of people don't really think about this. Like, there's this like fine balance. Like, what are you trying to achieve? And so, like down in Florida, they've like sort of implemented a few things over the years that have caused there to be like an increasing quality of the deer. But when they implemented those rules at first, like people were kind of against it. Like, for instance, there used to be like the antler restriction used to be like, I think it was 5 inches, like on both sides. So you could shoot spikes. And at the time it was like all you would ever see was spikes. So when they changed it to 10 inches main beam or 3 points on one side, like people were pretty upset about it. They were like, oh, we're never going to kill deer. Lo and behold, a few years later, like now you see a lot more, larger deer. But the higher you make those restrictions, the less opportunity there's going to be. And there's sort of like, there's a balance that managers need to find between, like what is that cutoff where you still have lots of opportunity, where like the average Joe that's just like, hey, I only get to hunt a few days a year, and like I want to be able to shoot the first deer that I see. How do you appease that guy while also appeasing the people that are like, man, I'd love to see a really big buck. So I think it's an important question to ask, and I think it's a really cool topic for a study.
Yeah, and I think it also comes down to there's some states where, like when I was hunting in New York, there basically were no antler restrictions, and then when I left Vermont, it was the same thing there, where it was if it's brown, it's down pretty much. You just got to have somewhat of a nub for it to be counted as a antlered deer. And at the individual level, you can still have these personal questions of like, okay, do I want to harvest this younger deer? Do I want to let it grow and live longer? And what this study shows is that that question can kind of vary depending on the species that you're looking at.
Yeah. And I think that's an interesting point that you bring up there too, because like a lot of people will sort of impose their own regulations that are more restrictive than the regulations that are in place. And I think a big part of that, and it's not really something that's discussed in this paper, and maybe we're getting ahead of ourselves here with like all these like discussion points, but a lot of states have bag limits, and that forces people to be more restrictive with what they're going to harvest, because it's like, yeah, you could shoot the first deer. Like for instance, I'm going to Kansas this year for the first time. I get one buck. I could shoot a 3-inch spike if I wanted to, but like I only get one, so like why would I shoot that? No, I'd rather wait, for like at least like, I don't know, 130-inch buck if I'm going to be in Kansas. And that's something that in Florida we still don't really have. Like you can kill 5 bucks a year if you wanted to.
That blows my mind.
And it just takes all that selectivity away. Like you don't have to be selective. You just kill every buck that's legal. Most people will never hit 5 in a year, So anyway, we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's talk about this paper.
I like the discussion. Should we like kind of go into the specifics then of these two management strategies just real quick, as long as we're
Yeah.
All right, so they got recreational management, which is kind of the provide opportunity for the most amount of people strategy.
This is what they're calling them in Wyoming, right?
Yes. Yeah. Wyoming.
So the study took place in Wyoming. Yeah.
And so it's all based on male to female ratios. So recreational management, they target 30 to about 60 males per 100 females per management unit. Then the special management strategy, which I guess tries to select for, it's less inclusive, less opportunity for hunters, but is trying to grow those bigger bucks. And that's where they are looking for these preseason ratios of 60 to 70 males per 100 females, so a little bit higher.
I'll just mention, like that's something I never really thought about, was how the male to female ratio not only gives you an idea of like how many males there might be, but also the quality of those males. The lower the ratio, the more males are getting harvested, the fewer there are going to be at that older kind of trophy size. So something to keep in mind when looking at different units.
It's a good point, because like if you go on like the Go Hunt app, which is not a sponsor, but hey, if you guys want to sponsor us, you go on that Go Hunt app and you start looking at like different units. For instance, in Colorado, you can look at, they have the ratio of like elk, bulls to cows, or like if you want to look at deer, it's bucks to does. And yeah, same thing for me. I was always thinking about it like, oh well, there's more bucks in this area, so that's where I want to hunt because there's more opportunity for bucks. But I hadn't considered that.
Right. Yeah, and that's kind of how I thought of it too. So I guess it all works out in the end. You still want to go to the spot that has the highest ratio, but yeah.
But I guess the thing that I'm not 100% sure about is it just hunter harvest that's driving those ratios? or predator harvest for
Mm-hmm.
that matter. Is it because of that, or is it just like, I don't know, like, is it habitat related? Is it genetic related? Like, I guess like that's a question they didn't really get into here.
Yeah.
Like, how did they determine what those ratios should be, or did they just use like these more restrictive uh, regulations, and like that was the ratio that sort of came out of it, and they were like, all right, let's use that as our target.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So I don't know.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder how much is also, as someone not looking for a trophy and just trying to shoot something. My first deer. I wonder if they'd be more naive in those higher ratios too. Like for the same caliber deer, you'd be more likely to get a better opportunity.
I mean, I feel like there's
it's
so
totally,
many variables that could like play into that, but like just thinking about like in Florida, because that's what I know best. Like some of the quota permit areas that we have, like I don't know what the buck to doe ratios are, but I would imagine that there's more bucks in those areas, and that kind of gets into like I was going to talk about this at the end more, but there's variable regulations in Florida depending on which wildlife management area you're in. So it'd be like really interesting to look at, because there's so much variability in like a relatively small area, to look at these different WMAs to see how that impacts like the buck to doe ratio and like antler size and like all these things of like harvests, which is something I've like wanted to look into and maybe like do an analysis and write a paper on. But
So are you talking pretty much exactly what this paper did?
Sort of, yes, but like with whitetails.
Yeah. So I guess, getting back to this paper, so we're looking at pronghorn. They're really interested in pronghorns because other studies have shown that most of the horn growth, so for any listeners that don't know the difference between horns and antlers, there is a difference. Pronghorns, they have, what do they call these, true horns? They don't drop them. Antlers get dropped every year, so there's kind of this continuous growth. And most of that growth happens by the time that these things hit like 3.5 years old. And so this study wanted to look to see if there's any relationship between pronghorn harvest rates and the abundance of these large horned males. And they were expecting there to be kind of no relationship in that, it doesn't matter how many of these large, or how many males you harvest, or, the number of large males that you harvest, there's going to be maintained opportunity to harvest these large horned animals. And they also wanted to compare that to other species, like I was saying before. So they compared it against bighorn sheep, and they also compared it to elk. And I guess as far as how they did that, they ran a bunch of models, and they got a bunch of pronghorn. I think they had, they had something like 1,800. Yeah, which that's pretty impressive. So they got data from 1,800 pronghorns that were collected, again, all from public land hunters, 2019 to 2022. And they covered 9 different hunt areas in Wyoming. Like Cody was saying before, they have these different hunting strategies. So most of those areas had the special category. So that's pressure on more males in the area. And then a couple of them had that recreational hunting opportunity or management strategy. And they looked at how horn size varied, and they used Boone and Crockett measurements. So kind of cool to see that, these are things I typically think of being in the woods and don't expect them to be in scientific papers, like Boone and Crockett stuff. So that was cool to see that they're using those protocols. And then, like we talked about in our paper from last week, they also were looking at the age of these deer. And so that's where they take a tooth out, and then they look at the rings on the teeth, like you count rings on a tree to figure out the age. And the other thing that was kind of cool was that they were looking at differences in the growth rates relative to these units, because depending on the environment that they got these things, you're going to have differences in horn size. And that's, an important thing to consider when you're going out. It's like, what are those attributes that might increase horn size, and how does that play into where you want to harvest your animal from? And so they made these age-corrected growth rates that they incorporated in their models to really be able to better understand how harvest rates were directly affecting the horn size and the proportion of the population that had these large horned animals. And then there's also a little bit of data that they got from Wyoming Game and Fish Department looking at just overall harvest rates and herd size. Yeah, I saw you were about to go, so go for it.
I'm going to start putting up my hand instead so I don't cut people off. So I thought it was interesting, though, if you look at that map of, and maybe you could pull up the map just to show people. It shows the recreational areas are like up north. And then, should I wait until you have the map up?
I'm getting there.
Do you know how to pull the map up?
I got it on my other screen here, so I'll be there in a second.
Here, I can do it. Maybe.
No, I don't know if you can.
We're
getting there.
It says I can.
Keep going. Keep talking though.
Anyway, so I'm pulling it up so I know what I'm talking about. So basically, the recreational areas have these like negative growth factors, and the special hunt areas have these positive growth factors. I mean, a couple of the ones further north are negative as well. But I kind of wonder like how much that has to do with potential like harvest rates and stuff, because it seems like there's a correlation there, like from the places where they have more male harvest, that there's a lower growth factor, whereas the places where they have less male harvest, they have a higher growth factor. So I wonder how much like hunting pressure affects the horn growth in some sort of way.
You guys seeing the paper now that you're done talking about it?
Not yet.
No, you still haven't shared it.
It says I'm sharing. Okay, that's weird.
Here, let me try.
But yeah, that's interesting. And it also looks like it like decreases as you get away from Colorado. Like further north away from Colorado. But
yeah. But I also wonder, like, maybe that has to do with latitude, Like, what's north of Wyoming? I don't know.
Montana?
Yeah, north of Wyoming is Montana. How about now? You guys seen anything yet?
No. One day you'll figure it out.
I guess that's not today.
But
so here we go. I got it.
Hey, there it is. So, yeah, it kind of seems like there's like a latitudinal gradient there.
Yeah.
It's kind of a shame that they didn't have like recreational areas further south, because I feel like there's sort of that confounding latitudinal gradient. Like, I don't know if it's a latitudinal gradient, but it could very well be, because I don't think there's a lot of pronghorn in Montana. There are certain areas where they have them, but I think we lose them as we go further north, right? It'd be great if we had a pronghorn biologist. I think we lose them as we go further north. So I like wonder if this like horn growth factor is like related to the latitudinal change.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Like, I'm just throwing this idea out there, but they didn't really discuss that. But it looks to me like there's a latitudinal gradient.
Yeah.
So
for sure.
Yeah, you have your highest value at the south, and then it gets lower and lower. It took me a second to notice the negative signs there. I was like, what do you mean the gradient? But yeah, lowest value is at the furthest north, highest value is the furthest south. And even like you were saying, like even if you ignore that recreational unit, even just within the special unit, you still see that decrease as you go north.
Exactly. So it would have been really nice if they had some recreational units that are further south. Because it kind of makes me wonder if there's a confounding variable there that they didn't consider.
Yeah.
Or at least that they didn't have data to consider. So anyway, I'm derailing the train of thought, but it was just something that stood out to me.
No, yeah, and the negative growth factor is also a little weird. Like, I don't know how growth.
Well, I think that's relative to the average.
So, okay, we're like talking standard deviations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, up there the antlers
They go in.
They shrink.
they shrink drill into the head until it gets the brain, and then they die, and that's why there's less bucks there because
Right.
Got it. It's all coming together.
Yeah.
Should we do results real quick and then continue
so I'll
on?
just also quickly mention just those simulations. So, like I said, they ran these simulations on populations of pronghorn as well as the bighorn sheep and the elk, and they wanted to see how there were differences in age structure and hunting pressure, how that affected the abundance of these large weaponed animals. So they included estimates for like what's the maximum age of these animals, their growth rates, harvest rates, and then also natural mortality. They applied different hunter selectivity. So whether it was just kind of like a random selection, you just take out a random individual, or selection for those larger, what might be considered like trophy animals. And that was based on changing the proportion of the harvest that's represented by those larger animals. So 2 different ways that they were looking at this. One was with the real data, and then the other one was with the simulations.
Nice. We're good for...
Yeah. Nicely done. That was a very succinct summary.
That was great. I'll go real quick on the results. Okay, what they found from the real data, from those 1,800 or so male pronghorn, from each of those, 9 units, averages for age ranged from 3.75 years to about 3 1/3. 6 1/3 year age. Average horn size was about 179 centimeters, ranging from 166 to a 200 centimeter horn. Something to know.
Inches? Does it say it in inches?
65 inches to 89 inches.
There we go.
That's always good for that.
I gotcha.
Thank you.
Well, it's like hard when we're doing this podcast where we're trying to like make this, more understandable for the average Joe, and nobody here really understands the metric system, but science insists on
that was
using
one thing that it was kind of funny to read too. The Boone and Crockett stuff, that's all in inches, so they had to make conversions from Boone and Crockett to the metric system, and then
it's kind of funny.
Okay, so then large, I should have looked. Did you look this one up, Matt? What they considered large antlers is over 193 centimeters. What that would be?
Ooh, I did not look that one up. But if the other one was, it's probably what? So it's probably like mid-90s.
This is a pretty big.
I got 75.
No, 75. Yeah, 75. No, you're right. Because the maximum was.
I've killed bucks that were 75.
Yeah, so 75. About 75 inches.
An example of a whitetail. I mean, never mind. I was like, I can give you a whitetail that's that big, but the measurements are all different, so ignore me. Anyway,
Mark just wants to show off the deer he's killed.
Dude, what are you talking about? You can see them all. They're right there. I don't have to do it. Actually, you guys can't see all the ones that are on the wall up in front of me here.
All right.
I'm doing a really good job at derailing our train of thought.
Are you in your boxers right now?
Oh yeah, I forgot on camera. Dude, I work from home, man. This is the attire. I got my collared shirt on up top, and then in the bottom, I got.
I'm right there with you.
He's got something on.
I mean, let's just be happy that I have something. Right? You guys could have just been staring at my bare ass. It's fine.
All right.
It's insane that 95% of the people that listen to this podcast wouldn't have had a clue because most people are watching the video. But you had to point it out.
I'm glad he did because I missed it.
I'm comedic relief because
I figured that's why you were giggling, but
I totally lost my train of thought.
So we were talking about antler size.
Boxers. These are just a new, like very, hip shorts that are just.
Oh yes, like the old basketball shorts.
Yeah, exactly.
You're trendy.
Yeah, I'm trendy. Yeah.
I'm right, I'm right there with you. It's just funny.
All right.
So
Anyway,
average age at harvest did decrease with increased harvest rates, as you'd expect.
It was like a half year younger for every 10% increase in harvest rate, right?
Yeah, I didn't write that down, but yeah.
It was.
I got the surfacey results here. Like they talked about, most of that horn growth is put on in the first 3.5 years. I think Matt mentioned that in the beginning. So horn size only like slightly increases every year after that. And it averages about 2.1 centimeters or about an inch.
3/4 of an inch, yeah.
3/4 of an inch additionally, or of additional growth each year. So pretty minimal.
And that probably slows down too, you know, as these things get older.
yeah.
Yeah, it definitely seems like it kind of plateaus. You get most of that, you get like exponential growth and then plateauing off after that 3.5 years, where it really decreases at least.
Get to the juicy stuff, man.
They found.
I just want to say one thing that I found really interesting as far as like the variability in these areas. So, we've got these special units, these recreational units, and they looked at the proportion of males that were harvested that would be considered, I don't think they said the trophy, but it was large horned males greater than 193 inches. And that proportion ranged from 1% to 100%. Now, they didn't include, the numbers harvested, but that just goes to show like how variable these management actions can be with the harvest success and, what you're getting out of it. So I thought that was kind of cool. 1% to 100%.
Yeah, it's all over the place. And then I guess the simulations left. They didn't find. They did find at low to moderate harvest levels, there were more large horned males harvested in the pronghorn simulations, and they didn't really see real divergence at higher levels where there was more harvest.
That's the juicy part. That's weird.
Totally
that's
different.
like a weird thing.
Yeah,
they saw
totally
the
different.
population of, they saw the population of male pronghorn increase by like 4 times when they started applying more like harvest, which with high hunter selectivity, it increased the number of trophy bucks by like 4 times. So I forget what they were calling trophies, but like the number of trophies that were harvested increased 4 times.
The trophies were just the large, right?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if large was the same as trophy. Like
that was different.
I was calling trophy. They kept referring to it as bucks that would meet the minimum requirements for like the record books or something. So I would call that a trophy. I don't know if that's the same as large. It was unclear if there was a difference between large and that. But I'm calling it trophies. But basically, they're saying that when they increased harvest rate but had high hunter selectivity, the number of trophy bucks in the population increased by 4 times, which is crazy. But also, what the heck is high hunter selectivity?
Yeah, that was a little.
Like they didn't really.
So
it kind of seems like they applied like selectivity factors in these.
So
I didn't see that part. So
hunter selectivity meant that high hunter selectivity was specifically 90% of the harvested population would have been in the top 25% of, I think it was like weapon mass. So basically what it's saying is you're only going to be harvesting a very small percentage of the population with that high selectivity. So all of those younger bucks are now going to mature and reach that larger and older size. So that's why you have this big increase in the number of older animals, because you have much greater numbers of those individuals surviving to get to the size that they would then be considered a trophy. Once they're a trophy, then they're eligible to be harvested.
Right.
And
so it seems to me, unless I'm misunderstanding this, like it seems to me that then this isn't showing that higher harvest numbers leads to more. It shows that that higher harvest numbers leads to more trophy bucks. It's showing that hunter selectivity is what leads to more trophy bucks.
Right, and that makes sense. If you think of like those private whitetail farms where they're extremely selective. They wait till these deer hit like 5-6 years of age. Everything that they're harvesting is a really nice buck. They're extremely selective. There's a lot of bucks on the land, and they're just extremely selective about what they're taking.
But what I find interesting about this model, though, is that by including hunter selectivity in the model, I feel like you're now not testing the management strategy anymore.
Well, right? I think the management strategy is what drives the selectivity. So that selectivity would be like the special unit, right? So that's where you're only allowing them to harvest like the maybe fewer, you're giving out fewer tags with the expectation, like you were saying earlier, if you only have one tag, or if it takes you 15 years to get this tag, you're going to wait to see something really big.
Right. So I don't know, maybe that was lost on me, but okay, that makes sense. So basically the strategy, the management strategy being the number of tags given out that forces selectivity. Well, it doesn't force it, but
it drives
inadvertently creates more selectivity, right?
Or, I guess there probably aren't like horn restrictions on pronghorn, because you're probably talking like we were saying before, it's such a small difference that you'd be looking at. But like you could have horn restrictions where you're whether you can harvest anything or if it has to have a certain number of points, stuff like that, where you can really drive that selectivity.
So so that's kind of like the issues, like with management strategy, it's like hard to actually create selectivity in the management, like in the regulations. So it all comes down to like a hunter's perception of whether it's a big buck or not, right? So I don't know. I almost like I want to question whether this model is really representing like a realistic situation. You follow my train of thought? Because it's like how can a hunter be that selective when you're talking about the difference of like an inch or two in antler length, that you can't really tell that from 300 yards away, where most people are taking shot. Like most people are shooting these things 200 to 400 yards with a rifle.
Yeah.
It's like, how can you really be that selective?
I think they did a good job of wording it in the paper here, because they didn't do it based on, the inch, but rather based on like percentiles or quartiles. So basically you have 4 different categories. You have the largest 25%, and then you have the other 3 25%, right? So what they were saying is just, was this animal in the largest 25%? Right. I think that's something that hunters can probably have a close estimate to that. It's like, that's a big buck. I can tell that buck is like a top buck, and top buck here, I might not know like exactly 25%, but
I definitely couldn't. Like, I've never shot a pronghorn. I feel like I'm gonna go out there.
Yeah, pronghorn is probably a bit different.
It's gonna be like, that one's got antlers, Yeah.
Oh, that was a female.
Yeah, I think so. Looking at the numbers, the average size they got for those 1800 pronghorn was 70 inches, and then the max one they got was 78 inches. So we're talking like from average to trophy for this is 8-inch difference.
Yeah, but,
if you're saying
it's not 8 inches, like it's not linear inches, because the measurement of like Boone and Crockett like takes like,
okay.
like it takes the girth of the horn and the spread, like how far apart they are.
Right.
So I mean, we're talking about the difference of like an inch or two in length. And how can you I mean, I'm sure that some of the more experienced hunters that do this stuff like all the time can tell those differences, but I think a lot of hunters would really struggle to be able to pick out the difference between a big and a average pronghorn. So like adding that hunter selectivity into the model, like I understand it from like a numbers perspective, but like, is this really representative of something that you could actually recreate in real life? I don't know.
And I just want to.
You guys follow my train of thought with that?
Yeah, I got you now.
I don't know, Cody, if I followed you correctly, but in terms of like the variability in horn size, so the average horn size per hunt area ranged from 65 inches to 78 inches. Now, like Mark was saying, this is a composite of all the different measurements, but those are averages. So you also have ones that are going to be over, because they also
right.
So you have some that are going to be greater than that, probably greater than 80 inches. But that's those are the biggest ones.
The ones that escape the high fence area.
Right. I totally wrote that down in my notes as the range. Sorry. Thanks for catching that. But yeah, that seems very challenging to tell apart, especially if you, like you said, you're shooting at these guys like significant distance.
Yeah. I mean, even with archery, like it's pretty common for people to have to take like 70-yard shots at these things because their eyesight's so good. They're super skittish. So I don't know. It's just something to think about. I think it's a really cool result and conclusion. That if they reduce the number of tags that are given out, and because of that, hunters are more selective in their choice of like, what size buck they're shooting, that you would see an increase in large bucks within the population. I just question how reasonable it is to actually have that happen in real life. Like if that management strategy would work the same way that it did in a model.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think that's a fair point. Like you're saying, like, but yeah, can you still distinguish that top 25% for pronghorn?
I think we just need to go hunt pronghorn and figure this out.
Yeah, I like that.
But
I've got a bunch of points, and I think I've got 3 points in Wyoming, and I've got 4 points in Colorado. But you need like 20-something points in Colorado, so that might not happen anytime soon. But Wyoming, I mean, we already know which unit has the highest antler growth, so we can probably go there.
Yeah, and we just got to figure out which unit it was that had 100% of the harvests being those biggest ones.
Yeah, I'm gonna guess it's probably that one in the Southwest.
Yeah.
But anyway, I kind of wanted to segue this a little bit, just because like we're not pronghorn hunters. None of us have hunted pronghorn, so it's kind of hard to like relate this to our own experiences. But I kind of mentioned this earlier, like in Florida with white-tailed deer, like we have this like really, I think it's pretty unique, sort of the diversity of like management strategies that we have in Florida. There are some other states that do this to some degree, but like literally every single wildlife management area you go to in Florida has different restrictions, whether it's bag limits, whether it's you can only shoot bucks. Sometimes you can shoot 2 bucks. Sometimes you only shoot 1. Sometimes you can shoot a doe. Sometimes no does. Sometimes you get 1 doe and 1 buck. And then we have different antler restrictions as well. We have Some areas still have both antlers need to be 5 inches, or no, sorry, we don't have that one anymore. It's both antlers need to be 5 inches, and one antler needs to have at least 2 points on it. So that's like the lowest restriction that we have, and then we have 3 points on one side or 10 inches. And we actually just got a new WMA that I'm going to be hunting this year. It just opened this year for the first time, and for the first time ever, I've seen this antler restriction, which is 4 points on one side or a 14-inch main beam. And so what's really interesting is like Florida has sort of found a way to both have the high opportunity and the trophy potential. So depending on what you want to do, you can apply for different areas, and get those different results, which I've always really appreciated about the way that things are managed in Florida. And I thought it was an interesting discussion point because there's so many places that have these like blanket rules across the whole state, and it's either opportunity or trophies or whatever.
Well, it's interesting that you say it that way, because like I think of here in Colorado, where like for elk, antler restrictions there's one policy. It's I think it's 4 points on one side, or I should know this. I think it's like a 7-inch brown tine or something like that. Don't quote me on that. But
hey, you're going to be the one with the bow. I don't need to know that.
That's true. But like those inch requirements, like I don't know how the hell anyone's able to guess that. It's like, hang on, you stay right there and let me think about this. I'm just going to be looking at the number of points. Anyways,
there's tricks to it. Like, the 10-inch main beam thing here in Florida. Like my rule of thumb is if the antler is twice the length of the ear, I'm shooting it, because the ears are typically about 6 inches here in Florida. So, I don't know if you can look at the ears of an elk and figure out what the average length is on those and use that as sort of like your comparison. I don't know. Yeah. But that's something you got to figure out.
So, anyways, I guess I think of this as there's two different ways to go about this. That one is, it's a very, when you have the antler point regulations, and when you have that varying based on, these different management units, it's a very specific and guaranteed effect. But still in Colorado, you have trophy units where you just have to wait longer to get that tag. So in a way, you're kind of forcing that same effect while maintaining the same requirements for what's considered a legal animal.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's like two ways to go about it. And it's like we were saying before, it's like if you limit the number of tags, then people will inevitably, especially like if you only get one tag and it takes you several years to get that tag, you're just going to be more selective, I definitely wouldn't be opposed, and I feel like people are going to get angry that I even said this, but I wouldn't be opposed to Florida reducing the number of tags that we have, because it would force people to be more selective. And I think we would start seeing a lot more bigger bucks. Although it's like there's two different approaches, right? You can either do the antler restrictions, which is like one way to do it, or you can go to that more restrictive like tag allocation. There are some papers, and maybe this is something we should talk about in a future episode. There are some papers that look at the effect of antler restrictions on age at antler size relationships, basically creating this like artificial decrease in antler size. Like basically animals that have smaller antlers, like they get older and they breed more because they're not getting harvested in those first couple of years. And so there's been some like model simulations done where it shows that like in theory it could decrease the size of antlers in the long run.
Yeah. It's like fishing down the food chain. You know, we harvested
Exactly.
all the biggest ones, and the ones that
Yeah.
survive have the genetics to reproduce sooner at younger
Yeah.
ages, and because of that, they don't have as much growth going into their bodies, or in this case, the horns. And so it's
Exactly.
something that you could have that effect. Yeah, I've definitely
Yeah.
heard of people, like if you see a buck that, if they have private land and they got a lot of, they can harvest multiple bucks, get rid of the ones that have the crappy antlers to get them out of the gene pool and only try to keep the ones that have, nice
So
racks.
that's a really interesting thought, and maybe we should do a episode about this, but I'm pretty sure that there's like I've read some evidence that shows that that's like not true, that even those so basically like there's a little bit of biology here, but typically the deer that have smaller antlers at young ages were deer that were born. So like a lot of people will be like, you got to kill all the spikes because we don't want the spikes because we want the first year bucks that have forks or 6 points in their first year. If they're a spike in their first year, it's got bad antler potential, and we need to shoot it and get rid of it because we don't want those genetics. But it actually turns out that those spikes typically are born later, so they had less time in their first year to develop antlers. So they were typically born during like the second rut or even third rut cycles. So I've heard that like thought process as well, but it turns out the science actually indicates that that's wrong.
And there's a lot of other things that are at play. I'm sure genetics do have some effect. Like you've definitely heard of hunters who say you see similar patterns in antler shape, and I think that's something that's going to be much more of a genetic effect. But as far as what dictates size, it's very much what was it feeding on. Was its mother like a yearling, or was it an older doe? How much nutrients did that fawn get while it was growing up? So I'm sure there's a lot of stuff that goes into it.
Yeah, but no, I definitely agree. Like bucks of a certain area look the same, and I've seen that on numerous occasions. In fact, I shot that buck right there.
There he goes again.
I shot that buck, and then the next year I had pictures of a buck in the same spot that had almost identical antlers, except it was a 10 point instead of an 8 point. And like you could really tell because the right side had like the points are like really far back, and then it just has this like really long main beam point that like sticks out and looks really weird. And that other buck had the same exact thing. So like those genetics definitely stay in an area. It's kind of cool. I love seeing that.
Well, let's come back to this paper.
Yeah.
So, I think, well, actually, okay, I'll give you that for 1 second. I looked it up. So it's for most of the state, it's not all of the state. There are some units where this differs, but for most of Colorado, it's like I said, 4 points on one side or a brow tine of 5 inches. So, Mark, you'll be my ruler for 5 inches.
I'll be like, unzip. Yep, we're good.
Mark, you said you don't know how the number of quotas get determined per WMA down here. Is it based on size, or is there like a ratio component?
I didn't say that. There's a lot of things that go into the quotas down here. Part of it is the size of the WMA. But also like hunter success plays a big part into that. If hunter successes are low, but they know the population density, they might increase the number of quotas so that they can still reach the target harvest. But they're trying to, reach that. The target harvest is essentially like the same thing that we've talked about with the Florida bears. Is like, all right, this is the population. Like, we know that the annual growth rate is, such and such. We can harvest a maximum of that same growth rate without causing a decline in the population. So then they look at the harvest success rates, and then adjust the quota, the number of hunters allowed, so that when you apply that success rate to the number of hunters, you get that same growth rate number. And that's sort of their way of conservatively estimating how big those quotas or the quota permit allocation should be for each area.
I see.
All right.
So this is like little bit of a tiny little bit of a tangent. Give me 30 seconds. So the anti-hunting people in Florida have been like posting like, oh, when they do the bear hunt, like we should buy up all the tags that would otherwise be used to harvest bears, which is an incredibly stupid idea, because what will end up happening is the harvest success numbers will be so low in the first year that the next year they'll just increase the number of permits or number of tags that are allocated, and they'll just keep doing that until one year maybe they stop buying all those tags, and then suddenly like the population gets like, I don't want to say decimated, but hit way harder than it should because they're messing with the system that's used to figure out the tag allocation. So if you were planning on doing that, please don't. It'll be bad for the bears. All right, Matt, bring it home. Bring it back.
Right. So coming back to the study, what does this mean for pronghorn? It means pronghorn are different than other species. You can hunt pronghorn, at earlier ages. They'll still have big horns. It's not going to have much of an effect. There's a small detectable effect of letting these animals live longer if you cut back on harvest rates. But when you cut back on harvest rates, you have less hunting opportunity. You have fewer animals getting harvested overall. So you have, in some cases, specifically for pronghorn, you have fewer of these large horn males that are getting harvested, because whether it's a 3-year-old, a 5-year-old, they could live probably up to 10 years old. There's not going to be that much of a difference in the size of their horns after that kind of 3.5-year-old point. So, like I said, none of us have gone out pronghorn hunting yet, but maybe when we do get out there, it's
3.5-year-old all day.
Yeah, maybe you might see like a cutoff there. It's like, okay, that one looks kind of small, and then the rest of them is going to be like, yep, that one looks good. And also they were talking about with the management implications for managers. They don't really have to be too concerned about the sex ratios with these things. You can have these kind of trophy units where you might have like a higher ratio of the males that are getting harvested being kind of on that larger side of the spectrum, but overall it's not going to have much of an effect on the population if you do allow greater harvest rates for the species, which is kind of cool for pronghorn. So
yeah. Can I say,
now I want to go pronghorn hunting just because I know that I don't have to be a great hunter or find a really old buck to get a decent one. I can just probably get the first one that looks big.
Yeah.
I'll say, I think this paper does a good job of pointing out like using hunters as a management tool. Like, I don't know if you call it citizen science here, like in fisheries, where you're turning in your harvest and they get a lot of info from it. And that's kind of like one of the main implications they talk about is they've always been managed on this ratio. Maybe they start managing as well on the quota allocation number based on these horn metrics as well, not just the ratios of male to female. Mm-hmm. And that all comes from hunter harvest and turning your animals in so they can get numbers off of it and have a better idea of how many hunters should be able to go out there so you have the best time while you are out there.
Yeah. But I think also I don't know, I might be completely wrong on this, but I think the whole ratios of male to females, I think the reason they use that to manage is because there's such strong correlations with like harvest rates and antler size. Like they don't have to use both,
for other species.
I think, sorry.
But no, also with this, well,
not so much the horn size.
Well, in all cases, harvest rate negatively influenced weapon size.
Yeah.
But in pronghorn, the effect is much smaller.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
but don't get grumpy if you get a nice deer pronghorn and they ask for measurements, I guess. Yeah. I don't know. Is that like a common thing? Like I obviously haven't gone through that, but
no, I mean, it depends. I think it depends on the state. Here in Florida, it's obviously pretty common because we have check stations everywhere and stuff. Mm-hmm. But you know, I liken this to basically when you get to the boat ramp and there's a guy standing there. It's like, hey, did you catch anything? He writes down everything you caught and how big everything was. Mm-hmm. Same kind of thing, except with hunting, I think it's just a little tighter because you have to check in and check out at check stations, or fishing and you don't. So I've never met anybody that gets mad about having to check things in, but there are definitely people that are like, oh, the more the government gets involved, the worse my life is. So, you know, whatever. Those people will be dead soon.
Well, that's good. Sounds like most people comply, except those who are doing illegal stuff, I would imagine.
All right. I think we're ready to wrap it up. We're right at an hour. So,
yeah.
Patricia's yelling. Yeah. All right, dudes. Great paper pick, Matt. And hope you guys enjoyed this one. Make sure that you're subscribed or following whichever platform you use. Click that button. And maybe go check out the YouTube channel Swamp and Stomp or Marco's Outside. And we'll catch you guys in the next one.
Thanks for listening.
Peace out.